Namaskar. I am Major General BK Sharma, Director General of United Service Institution of India, which is about 156 year old, and we look at whole gambit of geopolitics, national security, Atmanirbhar Bharat, military heritage, UN peacekeeping, skill development programs, and we have partnerships with more than about 50 countries all over the world. And I'm particularly happy today that we have Mr. Atul Singh, who's a former hardcore police officer, now graduated to seminal work and is heading Fair Observers, a prestigious international think tank based in Washington. And USI and Fair Observer, we have a memorandum of understanding under which we've done a series of programs. And today we are going to have some more conversations because of his presence in India. And we look forward to such more rich strategic conversations with him in future. Over to you, Atul.
Thank you very much. So those of you who have not heard of Fair Observer, think of us as a crowdsourced economist. We have more than 3,000 authors from over 90 countries. And the idea is to look at the deeper issues behind the news, provide context, and provide many perspectives from around the world. And today, we are going to have a perspective from India on the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, naturally, General Sharma here has been regularly to Russia. Yeah, he knows Russia inside out. We have had some very rich discussions over the years about Russian military strategy, the conflicts in Eastern Europe, and in particular in Ukraine. And we are at a particularly important period in the conflict. Ukraine has claimed some Russian territory. Russia is making advances. So, General Sharma, what is going on? Educate us.
Well, Atulji, this war is now into its third year, whereas Russians were hoping that they will be able to wind up this war in about a month's time and score a grand victory. But that appeared to be elusive. Now, today, as I look at the war, probably we are in a state of strategic stalemate with a little ascendancy that Russians have gained in the 4 regions where they had held a referendum, and now they are looking at politico-military consolidation of those 4 provinces.
So Donetsk and Luhansk.
Donetsk, Luhansk, probably the Donbass region, which is predominantly a Russian majority areas. But a spanner that has been thrown into the whole thing is the Kursk offensive, which has come about 30 kilometers inside Russian territory. And how Russians deal with that, we have to see. But let me tell you, having discussed with the Russians over many conversations, what is the end state that Russians are looking at? Russians very clearly know that, well, we are a nuclear power, and therefore it is a big joke that if the collective West think that they will be able to intimidate and subdue Russia. Therefore, no matter what happens and be whatever the cost, we are not going to succumb to any pressure, be it economic sanctions, military intervention, or anything of that nature. And therefore, one of the principal tools that they have used in this is the doctrine of escalate to de-escalate, that is bringing in the nuclear factor right in the early stages of this campaign and just confining NATO intervention only in terms of arms supply. Now, the Russian objectives are that they want de facto bifurcation of Ukraine by consolidating in the 4 provinces. Then they want to have the total control over the Sea of Azov and Black Sea region, so that they have the control over whatever 98% of the trade which flows out of Ukraine to the rest of the world, to have total domination. And in the meanwhile, they keep targeting the critical infrastructure of Ukraine. so that they're able to sort of paralyze the entire economy and foment some kind of an internal trouble, political trouble for Zelensky, with the hope that in due course of time they may be able to bring about a regime change and foist a regime which is, if not outwardly pro Russian, but neutral, and which gives them guarantees that Ukraine will not join NATO or they will not be part of the European Union. Now, this is the matrix in which the Russians are working.
So to summarize, they want a Ukraine that is not under the Western thumb.
Absolutely.
And they want a Ukraine wherein they are able to have a neutral, if not an allied government. And they want the coasts, really, or most of it.
Most of it.
Yeah.
Now comes to the Kursk offensive. How they deal with Kursk offensive, my sense tells me that they have permitted them to come in, though it has been kind of a strategic surprise, ab initio for Russians. But they will suck them in and they will use all the air power, the drone power, artillery to sort of impose very heavy attrition, so that with the passage of time, this offensive becomes unsustainable. Because this was the bargaining chip which Ukraine was trying to create, that if they have control over certain territory, maybe it will force Russians to come to the negotiation table and Ukraine may be able to get a good deal out of it. But on the whole, I would say that this, no matter even if there is a ceasefire, asymmetrically this campaign is going to prolong for a period to come, because this has also been made as a decision point by Russians to actually become the champions of a new international order and look at a security and economic architecture in Europe in which Russia is an important stakeholder. So those political and diplomatic objectives are very much related to the military victory or military gains that Russia seeks to obtain from this military campaign.
Well, so Russian aims are clear. And importantly, the Russian war economy is doing well.
Yes, if you go, I've been to Russia since the inception of this war, and I could see in the initial stages there was nervousness. Departmental stores were empty, people were little confused in which way the economy will go. But it goes to the credit of Russian resilience, which is a historical fact, that they will able to regroup, get a composure of themselves and look at alternate means of circumventing the economic sanctions by making use of third countries, use energy as a major source of income by diversifying their markets to East Asia, South Asia, China, India, as well as create a surge capability within their whatever industrial capacity that have. And now they have graduated to the high end of technology. They're working a lot in the chips, semiconductor, artificial intelligence, and integrating high-tech artificial intelligence into their military platforms.
Well, to your point, the Ukrainian GDP has cratered. It has gone down by a third, or it had actually last year, and it's gone down further, or maybe not. Even if it hasn't, it's not really growing. Whilst the Russian GDP has actually grown, and I always ask this question: what was Russia's biggest challenge since 1991? And it was capital flight. So you sold oil, you sold gas, you sold nickel, you sold all sorts of commodities, fertilizers, wheat, corn, edible oil, whatever. And the money that flowed into Russia left immediately to Monaco for buying of yachts. It left immediately to England for a Chelsea Football Club or a stake in Arsenal. And now all of that is off the table. That money now is circulating within the Russian economy. So they have a massive multiplier effect. Massive. And they were able to get assets, Western assets, at fire sale prices. So they managed to get a lot of them once sanctions came. And then, of course, there is the matter that you mentioned, the surge in industrial growth. Initially, of course, they were making bombs and bullets and guns and missiles and drones. And now they are making a lot more. In fact, real wages have gone up in Russia for the first time since 1991. In fact, people forget that the collapse of the Soviet Union led to absolute pandemonium. It was an unmitigated economic disaster. Real wages fell. Russians found life very difficult. Inflation skyrocketed. Savings were wiped out overnight. People were selling medals, decorated soldiers to make a living. So that trauma is now certainly behind Russia. And in a curious way, just as the American economy rebounded after the Great Depression thanks to World War II, the Russian economy has rebounded after the horrors of 1991 thanks to the war that began in 2022. And so even if Vladimir Putin dies, Putinism now is entrenched and Putinism is strong. And if the Russians get the feeling war is good, we can only imagine what it means for future Russian foreign policy.
Yeah, absolutely. You so sagaciously brought out these real issues to the fore which are not in the mainstream thinking.
Yes, so final question for you. What does this conflict mean for Europe? What does it mean for the US? And what does it mean closer home in Asia?
So this is an extremely pertinent question. Firstly, after decades of semblance of peace, Europe has again become a frontline group of countries as far as the Great War is concerned. Right. Consequently, they were all in the process of reducing their armed forces, their defense budgets, and they were talking about peace and whatnot. But today, you see, on one hand, their economy is in doldrums. There have been changes of regimes in the countries. Rightists have come to the power. And there is a spike in their defense spending in a very, very big way. And yet, it is creating a large number of critical uncertainties for them. Whether if tomorrow Russia becomes more emboldened and there is an offensive towards the Baltic states or some of these East European countries, whether Americans under the aegis of Euro-Atlantic Alliance will come to their help, or they need their own security architecture, which is classically, typically European. So this dilemma is very much there. As far as US is concerned, I think they have again suffering from what you call is a strategic outreach. Because they opened the Ukrainian front, in the meanwhile, because of their policies, the West Asia has erupted in a very big way, and Chinese assertion and coercion in Taiwan is again posing a problem for them. So there is a debate even within American strategic community whether we will be able to hold too many fronts or not, because they do not have the logistic and the military capabilities to address so many fronts.
Correct. Right? And John Mearsheimer makes a case for it very eloquently.
Now, what makes the matter worse is the uncertainty related to the outcome of the elections in November. They don't have a clear policy. Who is going to be in the driving seat, and what is going to be that foreign policy outlook as far as America is concerned? While this dilemma has its impact on so-called Euro-Atlantic Alliance and future of NATO, at the same time, there are seeds of dissension which are coming up within the European conglomerate. There are countries which are drifting in different directions. Whether Euro-Atlantic Alliance will be able to hold itself against a Russian assertion or not, these are the critical uncertainties which only some clarity will come into it after the election results in November or out in US.
So ये बताइए घर में क्या होगा? Or to put it in English, what will happen closer home?
See, closer home, we have so far been able to navigate this problem of balancing between the great powers, right?
That's another discussion we'll have.
Yeah.
That's for next time.
So, as far as we are concerned, we know that well. Firstly, we have a collusive hybrid scenario on our borders. On one hand, you have Pakistan, which is again whipping up terrorism in Jammu region. Elections are around the corner. And on the other hand, China has maintained a status quo kind of a fait accompli at the LAC. And then there are certain societal problems within India, right? Whether we are moving in the same direction as a society or not, or where is a political consensus on our core national security issues. These are the questions that need to be addressed. Concurrently with this is the state of our economy. We need a sustainable economy, because if we want to avoid the jobless growth which has actually haunted Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, and the regime changes which have come in the recent past in our neighborhood, which have a proclivity or probably a propensity to bandwagon with Chinese. These are the new challenges that have come up, and they have security implications for India which need to be addressed. So these are the questions that we need to have. And then your defense spending per se, your military modernization, because our R&D base is still very narrow. This Atmanirbhar Bharat is a very good kind of a project, but what is the scale of success of this Atmanirbhar Bharat in the light of an interface that we want to have between the armed forces, DRDO and the industry? These are certain areas which still require a lot of fine tuning and lot of, I would say, calibration. So these are the set of challenges, and the most important challenge is this trend of, civil society movements which are leading to socio-political upheavals in our neighborhood, and we have sort of unemployment is on the rise. So we have to see that how do we skill the youth of our country and how do we harness their energies in the right direction, so that this collective youth dividend that we have is put to a good advantage.
All right. Then, on that note, on the youth advantage, let's continue the discussion on the threat India faces, particularly from Pakistan and China, the hybrid threats that face. And this, let's do it in our next episode.
Thank you. Yes, we would do that.
Thank you very much, General Sharma, for your time.
Thank you.